If you got ADHD, you already know that mainstream advice like just try harder is pretty much useless, and honestly, not everyone understands what it's like. Maybe you don't have meds or your family doesn't even believe in ADHD and just thinks you are lazy. But that doesn't mean you're out of options. So in this video, I'm going to share 5 practical ADHD hacks to beat procrastination without the meds. And if you don't give these tips a try, you might keep blaming yourself, doubting your abilities, and stay stuck in that endless cycle. But if you do, you could gain a little bit more control and feel just a bit more confident in managing your ADHD. Managing ADHD without meds isn't easy, but over the years, I developed a framework to help me stop procrastinating, and I call it the FOCUS framework. And each letter stands for a hack, and the first letter F is all about finding your priorities. And trust me, this one is huge. Like, I remember when I had so many important things to get done, like tax documents, residency paperwork, and other deadlines that had like real consequences. And like most people say that ADHD brains work well under pressure. Deadlines push us to get things done. But for me, it kind of like reached to a point where even the deadlines couldn't get me moving. Like, I was literally stuck in that cycle. I would stare at my to-do list and I would feel so overwhelmed that I couldn't even lift my finger, and I would end up doing random stuff or even take a nap because I thought sleeping is better than facing the reality. And then I would beat myself up over it, like, why couldn't just I do the thing? Just get out and do the thing. And it got to a point where it was so bad that stress wasn't in just my head anymore. It kind of like started affecting my health, and honestly, it just made me hate myself a little bit more every single day. It's like walking into a restaurant where the menu has 20 pages and it's full of options, and then you start to overthink what you're in the mood for, what you had for dinner last week, or what's the healthiest option, what's the restaurant is famous for, etc., etc. Your mind kind of starts to overthink, and before you know it, the waiters come back 3 times and you're still stuck trying to decide between tacos or pasta. And that's called decision paralysis. And it's the same thing that happens with our tasks. Without a clear way to prioritize, you end up feeling stuck and doing literally nothing. It's kind of like our brain freeze because there's too much going on. And neurotypicals can usually look at a list and think, I'll start with the most important one. But for us, all the tasks scream for our attention like it's a little kid, and it's impossible to decide which one is the most important one, So instead, we just like avoid the whole mess, and that avoidance basically hits our self-esteem. It makes us feel like we're not enough and we can never get our act together. Like, I can't remember the last time I felt truly relaxed. There's always that guilty voice in my head reminding me of something I should be doing, but I'm totally avoiding. Now let's get into the science behind why prioritizing is so much harder for us. It's not because we're lazy asses, but it's about like how our brains are wired. So people with ADHD have a tougher time with executive function, which is the part of brain that helps us to plan, organize, and prioritize, but it's often off doing its own thing. Let me break it down with an example so that it's much easier to understand. So imagine you're planning a birthday party. Okay, and someone without ADHD might naturally think, okay, I'll pick a date, make a guest list, choose a venue, and so on, right? It's pretty easy and it's straightforward. But for someone with ADHD, it's more like, should I have a theme? What kind of cake should I get? What if no one shows up? Should there be games? And wait, do I even want this? All these thoughts basically hit at once and they feel equally urgent. So what do? We procrastinate, ignore it until last minute, and then panic, stress out, and eventually basically burn out. And another important difference between us ADHD people and neurotypicals is that we have difference in dopamine regulation. Dopamine is basically that reward signal in our brain. It's what makes us feel good when we finish something or when a task is interesting. But with ADHD, our brains don't get that dopamine boost as easily, especially when we're doing something like boring or repetitive. That's why like motivation can feel almost impossible sometimes. You try everything, you basically give your all in, but it still feels like impossible because our dopamine system, that regulation works a little bit different than the neurotypicals. You probably heard people say, starting is the hardest part, just start, it will get easier. But honestly, that's not how it like works for people with ADHD. That's something that I realized. If a task doesn't give us that dopamine kick, starting doesn't magically make it more satisfying. I could start the same task 100 times, and if it's boring, I'll quit 100 times too. It's not like if I sit down, like magically I'm able to do that thing. No. It doesn't work like that. Like back in high school, I would try the whole just start thing with studying, but it never worked. I would end up like sitting in front of my desk, literally crying over my textbook, and I mean literally crying. And even when I managed to start, it didn't get easier. Like my brain wasn't getting any rewards from reading those boring chapters. Every single minute felt like a torture, and I was literally crying while studying. So why should you know this? Knowing this difference is actually huge, because it means that if you struggled with prioritization or sticking with the task, it's not because you're lazy or not trying hard enough. It's because your brain needs a different approach. I'm not saying that just because you have ADHD, like you're not going to be able to do these. So don't blame yourself. No, it just means that you're going to have a different approach towards it. We all need to get things done. So that's why having a solid prioritization system matters, because it will give you a roadmap when your brain can't naturally create one. So it's going to make it easier for you to know where to focus your energy. And basically I had enough with this problem with prioritization. So I decided to create my own prioritization guide to stop my life falling apart just because I couldn't figure out what to do first. And what makes this guide unique and different than others is that it actually considers what matters for ADHD brains, like your motivation levels, energy, and task duration, deadlines, and even how fun a task is. Right now, I'm offering it for free to early users. Why? Because I want your feedback to make it better before I launch a paid version later. So if you watch this video and if you're interested in it, there's a link in the description below. And here's what you will get. A simple template that takes the guesswork out of prioritization, and also a system that automatically sorts your tasks based on what really matters, when you have ADHD. And another thing is that your feedback will allow me to change and shape the prioritization guide. So you will be one of those kind of like an early founders, I would say. And I made this for myself first, but I know how much it sucks to feel stuck. So if you're tired of that struggle and, if you're interested, there's a free version now, which is in the description below. And I will appreciate if you can give me a feedback, because we can improve it together and update it whenever I'm gonna launch the paid version. So now you got your priorities sorted, but let's be honest, knowing what to focus on is just half of the battle actually. The real challenge is staying focused long enough to actually get things done, especially when distractions are literally everywhere. So let's move on to the next letter in the focus framework, letter O, which is all about optimizing your environment. No matter how clear your priorities are, if your environment is full of distractions, you're still going to find yourself chasing the dopamine rabbit down Instagram's endless scroll hole, And this is where I also struggled, especially with taking breaks, because I love the idea of Pomodoro method, like taking breaks before you're exhausted so you can keep your energy up. But let's be real, like how many times you have told yourself you're just gonna take a 5-minute break, and then you take like an hour and a half break while you find yourself scrolling on Instagram. For me, those quick breaks were kind of like a myth, because I would just lay down, close my eyes for a second, and suddenly here I am liking cat videos on Instagram. And it's not that I don't want to get back to work, it's that Instagram is like a little dopamine slot machine. More you scroll, more dopamine I get, and I get addicted to it, and I spend hours and hours on it. So, and the problem with those apps is that they're designed to be stimulating. Instagram is all about short form, high reward content that's easy to consume, but just doesn't leave you fulfilled. And my fingers would just scroll those reels without me even realizing it, almost like an autopilot. So I basically had enough with this mindless scrolling, and I decided to delete all the apps from my phone. But since I'm a content creator, quitting Instagram completely wasn't really an option. I need to stay connected, reply to my DMs, post stuff, and keep up with other creators are doing, because believe it or not, I think there's some benefits to scrolling through other people's progress, in my opinion. For me, for example, seeing gym girls kill it on Instagram Reels, and when I see that daily, I was like, maybe I should hit the gym too. And it was a little reminder for myself. But we all know that willpower isn't a fair fight against billion-dollar tech companies. They have teams of psychologists trying to figure out how to make us hooked. So I tried using Instagram only through a web browser. And if you ever tried that, you know that it's so glitchy and so slow and so annoying. It makes it so hard to reply to DMs. So it was so bad that it took away the benefits too. And I tried to found the middle ground. And in my opinion, that's downloading Instagram only when I need it and then delete it again when I'm done. It might sound like a hustle, But that is exactly the point, because these extra steps are just annoying enough to make me rethink before re-downloading it every single day. And I only let myself re-download it when I'm at the gym, in the bathroom, or waiting for a bus, because it keeps me from mindlessly opening it during my work time and getting sucked in. And I also try not to scroll on Instagram when I'm laying on my bed. And I do the same thing with my YouTube. You know, if I watch it on my phone, I just end up getting lost in the shorts feed, and I don't like that. So I just try to watch my YouTube only on my iPad or on my computer. If I'm watching it on my phone, I try to do it at the gym, because like bigger screens somehow makes me more intentional about what I watch, and I don't watch YouTube shorts in bigger screens. So, you know, the point is basically it's not about forcing yourself to have more self-control, but it's about making it harder for your brain to find those quick dopamine hits in the first place. Because when you don't have those apps right away at your fingertips, you don't have to fight that urge much, and it's just annoying enough to re-download and delete it again. And honestly, once I kind of like removed those distractions, I had less to do on my phone, and getting things become way easier, because I also noticed like I wasn't feeling as mentally fried all the time. For people with ADHD, limiting information overload is quite important, because our brains are wired to chase stimulation. Like, we love dopamine. So we need to be more strategic about what we let in. Now that you cut out those distractions, you might think the focus is guaranteed, right? Well, not really. Because even with a distraction-free environment, if your mind is racing, it's still tough to concentrate. I will share how you can calm your mind and find that focus without relying on ADHD medication. And it all starts with a simple but powerful combination that made a huge difference for me. Let's dive in. So the third letter in our focus framework, C, is all about calming your mind. When we think about focus, especially with ADHD, it's easy to picture those intense bursts of productivity where you suddenly clean your entire house at like 2 a.m. or write 3,000 words of that project you've been putting off for weeks. I mean, at least that's something that I do. But in reality, real focus is more like a calm, steady burn, kind of like a mindset of shodoka, which is a form of calligraphy in Japan. And in Japan, like shodo, the calligraphy style, is more than just writing beautifully. It's sort of like a form of meditation. Calligraphers, or shodoka, you know, those people enter a state where they're completely absorbed in each brush stroke, and they maintain a quiet, deep concentration. And they work with a sense of calm, of intensity, and their minds are still but fully focused. It's not about forcing or rushing the process. It's about being present in that moment and letting each stroke flow naturally. I bring this up because when we ADHD folks focus, we don't just focus, we just like hyper focus. It's kind of like focus, but we're on steroids. And when it happens, we go all in, we forget to eat, sleep, and even like blink. But the downside is that the harder we go, the harder we crush. It's kind of like watching an entire season of your favorite show only to realize it's 5 a.m. and now you have work in 3 hours. It's not fun, right? It's kind of like the homeostasis that happens in our body says like, you've gone too far, time to shut down a little bit. It's kind of like our way to balance everything in our body. So if we like hyper focus for a long time, then it takes down this cool down phrase where you do nothing but sleep. And that's where I use green tea, especially paired with L-theanine. Now, I know coffee is usually the go-to for getting stuff done, but it has its issues, especially for ADHD brains. Like, yes, caffeine gives you that temporary boost, but it's like borrowing energy from your future self. And you know how that goes. Kind of like your future you is not really happy about it. You know, caffeine boosts adrenaline, which can help you focus by increasing dopamine and norepinephrine. But then the crash comes, like it's a little jittery, a little anxious, right? You probably know that feeling. And that is a problem when you're trying to stay productive without feeling like you need a nap in 45 minutes. Now, green tea combined with L-theanine is a different story, because I realized that green tea provides a more balanced energy boost without the jitters. Yes, green tea also has caffeine in it, but it has smaller doses, and it's balanced out by L-theanine, which is an amino acid that promotes alpha brain waves, the same ones that make you feel like you just finished taking a relaxed meditation session. So almost like caffeine works like a roller coaster, okay? It goes up, 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 and then it goes down. But with L-theanine, it basically smooths things out, and it creates a lot of people call like calm alertness, where you're focused but not like anxious. And instead of like getting going up and crashing down, it's sort of like a more of a gentle curve in energy levels. Basically, it's where you have the energy to get things done, but without you activating the fight or flight mode. You can stay in that steady zone, like a calligrapher, the shodoka that I mentioned. You're gonna have more of like a calm focus instead of going up and down. And you just need to remember that this is my personal experience and I'm not a doctor. So if you're thinking about trying a theanine supplement and drinking it with green tea, try at your own risk, okay? And start slow, see how your body reacts, and definitely consult a healthcare professional if you're not sure. I'm not gonna take responsibilities, okay? So we discussed finding calm focus through L-theanine and green tea. But managing ADHD isn't about just like calming down, but it's also about finding the right tools to stay tracked. And a proper digital setup can be crucial for maintaining productivity and organization. When it comes to managing ADHD, finding the right tools can make a world of difference, especially when you're trying to stay organized without feeling overwhelmed. And honestly, I love trying new apps. Like, it's really in my ADHD thing. And recently I came across Xstyles, and I think it might be just what some of you are looking for. It's kind of like a digital bullet journal. Like, it's simple and it's flexible and it's really super easy to use. So if you're someone who doesn't want to spend hours figuring out how an app works, I feel like Xstyles is really the app that you're looking for. Because one thing I like about Xstyles is how visually appealing and also customizable it is. Like, you can drag and drop elements, create your own pages, and design a space that feels right for you, if that makes sense. And also it's perfect if you're someone who likes their workspace to look good, feel intuitive, because sometimes I feel like a little bit of like that aesthetic boost makes things more fun to use and makes you use it more often. And if you're balancing multiple projects or just trying to get your life together in one place, Xstyles can help with that too. Instead of like jumping between 5 different apps, you can create a custom workspace for everything. And if you need a more advanced system, you can use the various unique features such as databases and relations, integrations, and task panel. So, who is this app for? I think I would recommend it to anyone who likes like a visual first approach to planning, and also creators who want their ideas to flow freely, and anyone who's tired of those like rigid old-fashioned productivity apps. If that sounds like it might fit your needs, check out the link in the description below. Give it a try and let me know what you think. Thank you Xstyles for sponsoring this proportion of the video. But even with the best digital tools, sometimes it's not enough to keep you from procrastinating, especially when you're working alone. This is where the next letter of the focus framework comes in, the letter U, which stands for utilize accountability. Am I not a genius? One of the best ways I found to stay on track is through a technique called body doubling. I'm not sure whether you have heard this before, but basically what body doubling means is that it's basically working alongside another person, even if they're not directly involved in whatever you're doing. For people with ADHD, it actually makes a huge difference. And scientifically speaking, ADHD brains tend to struggle with self-directed attention, which means staying focused when you're on your own can feel like trying to hold on a slippery rope. Like, we can't focus alone, or we struggle to focus alone. But when someone else is around, we, even virtually, it provides a sort of an external structure that helps us stay track on the task. It almost like you're thinking, okay, someone is watching me, I better keep working. And it can be especially effective when the other person is working quietly instead of like talking to you. And this creates sort of like an ambient accountability. And body doubling works because it can trigger the mirroring effect, where we naturally mimic the behaviors of others around us. And if the person is working with is focused, you are more likely to stay focused too. And studies have shown that this kind of like social facilitation can boost performance on tasks that require sustained attention. And there are a lot of ways to do body doubling. Like, you can try co-working spaces, or work alongside a friend, or even join like virtual study rooms. They're like study with me lives, etc., etc. But honestly, for me, what's worked best for me is a platform called Focusmate. It's not sponsored, okay? They probably don't even know that I exist. I just love it, and I've been using it for a year. And here's how Focusmate works. You basically go to your dashboard and you will see 3 options when it comes to session lengths. One is 25 minutes, and 50 minutes, and 75 minutes. And you pick the time that works for you, and you book a slot on the FocusMate calendar. And you can set up the sessions for the same day or even plan them out for the upcoming days. And when the time comes, you log into your session and get matched with a stranger who's also looking to get some work done. And at the start, you both share what you're going to work on. Some people just like type it in the chat, while some people just like turn on their mic and, you say a quick hello. It's kind of like saying, hello, this is what I'm going to work on today. Let's do this. What are you going to work on? Etc. etc. It's just like a very quick chat. And then you got a timer on the screen that tracks your work session, and when the time's up, a bell rings to let you know the session is over. And after the session, you share like with your partner how it went, whether you managed to accomplish whatever you said you're going to do. And it's kind of like a very quick, non-pressure way to check in with your partner and making sure that you stay focused, keep yourself accountable basically. And you might be thinking, why not just meet up with a friend at a cafe or a library to get stuff done? I tried that, okay? But I'm a person who will turn a study session into a social hour. I'll be like, you know what, maybe actually we should grab a coffee. And then I'll be like, okay, have you heard this? Or did you know this happened? So we would just meet up for a couple of hours, and out of 3 hours, I would chat for 2 hours. So it doesn't work with me. I just can't keep my mouth shut when I'm with my friends. And we end up spending way more time talking than working. So yes, it is fun, in my opinion, but it doesn't really help me to get through my to-do list. And if it's a stranger, I'm like, okay, let's get this done. How are you? I'm gonna work on this thing. What about you? Nice, let's work on. And after the session, I'm like, how was your session? And I'll be like, yeah, mine was good. Thanks for working with me, and bye. It's way less likely to get distracted or goof off if you would do with your friend. And also the Pomodoro method actually started working with me when I started doing FocusMate. How I do it is that I book like a 25-minute session at the beginning of my day, where I plan my day and schedule my things, etc., etc. And then I either do 50 minutes or 75 minutes sessions to get things done. And there were so many times that I really wanted to leave the session, but because it's a stranger and it would be so disrespectful, I never leave that session. So it just like forces me to get things done. And it's really good. If FocusMate isn't your thing, there are like other apps and communities, live streams. There's so many things that people do. You just need to type like ADHD body doubling. And I have a link in the description below. It's not an affiliate. It will just like give us 1 month free trial. I'm not going to get paid or anything, but if you would like imagine that if 100 people just click on the link, 100 of you will get a 1 month free, and I will get 100 months free, like almost like 10 years. So use the link in the description below. It's free. Okay. So now you got your accountability system in place. You're working along someone, right? But here's the thing. Even when you got all the external structure in the world, there is one more piece to the puzzle, which is stimulation. This part is super important because even with the best priorities and optimize my environment, a calm mind, and accountability, if you don't have the right level of stimulation, it's kind of like driving a car without a fuel. Isn't it a good example? And it's the last letter of our focus framework, and it stands for stimulate strategically. S. And when I say stimulation, I don't mean just like blasting music, drink a lot of coffee and making things chaotic, but it's more like this, kind of like an extra boost that is going to keep your brain engaged so that you don't drift or get bored. For example, have you ever find yourself doodling during a boring lecture or tapping your food while working on a long task, or just like shaking your legs whenever you're listening to something? That's basically a way for your brain looking for an extra input to stay focused. It's kind of like looking for an extra stimulation to make things a little more fun. For people with ADHD, finding that sweet spot of stimulation can make a huge difference, because without enough sensory input, our minds wanders a lot, but with too much, then we get overwhelmed and distracted. So it's about creating an environment where you are giving your brain just enough of what it craves, whether it's through sound, touch, or even visuals, like without kind of getting distracted. So how can you find that sweet spot of stimulation? So it's actually like really personal, and I think it also depends on the day. Like it changes every single day for me, but you need to keep experimenting with adding and sometimes taking it away and try to see what kind of level of stimulation you need that specific days. And there are a couple of ways that I like doing, and the first one is auditory stimulation. For me, like I love playing binaural beats or piano music or some classical music in the background, because I don't know, like I just can't work in complete silence. just becomes too boring for me. But if I would listen to a music with lyrics, that's also like too distracting. So for me personally, I find binaural beats are kind of like a sweet spot. And they are also known to promote focus and relaxation by syncing up brain waves. So I personally use Brain FM. It's kind of like a service that I've been using for a couple of years. And I just play like some random music. I'm not sponsored. I love them. Check it out if you're interested. And the second one is an olfactory stimulation. I never used the word olfactory before, but I thought it will make me sound smart. So I took a note and stick it there, and it says olfactory. I'm looking at there. Basically what it means is stimulation through sense. I think it might sound a little odd, but certain smells can actually help with focus. Like for example, peppermint or rosemary, and they have been shown to boost concentration and alertness. You know, if you have a diffuser, you can try dropping a couple of drops peppermint or rosemary, and you can just like have that in your workroom. I sometimes have it on my desk. You know, it smells good, helps you focus without caffeine, and it's nice. And it's actually quite interesting that certain smells can make us concentrate more because of the stimulation. And the third one that I like is physical stimulation. Whenever I'm working, especially like if I'm going to work long hours, I usually wear a heavy hoodie to provide a sense of pressure to calm myself and focus more. And I thought it was just me, but I realized that there were sort of like researches that it gives like a deep pressure stimulation, which can reduce anxiety and promote focus. And especially for ADHD folks, it works like even better. And I also heard that weighted blankets can also give this like deep pressure stimulation, but I haven't tried it yet. I don't have it. So if you know what it's like, just let me know in the comments. I was thinking, oh, even if it's a summer, I like to turn the AC on and wear something like heavy hoodie. And I would like to cover my head, and that's how I focus. And I thought this just like a personal thing, but it's ADHD related, which is interesting. And the last one is the visual stimulation. I sometimes use LED lights for that. I like setting them to different colors. I sometimes set them into purple or pink, and I sometimes just set it to slowly change my color during work sessions. It might sound so unnecessary, but these kind of like small adjustments actually makes such a big differences in combined. And everyone has a different experience with ADHD, and just because I have ADHD, it doesn't mean that everything that worked for me will work for you too. In my opinion, that is the most annoying part about like ADHD. You just need to keep trying, and sometimes what used to work will stop working suddenly too. It's so freaking annoying. But accepting it and going it with it makes things a little bit easier in my opinion. And it's gonna take a bit of experimentation, but you got this.